disabilities. We also we do training for parents, and for me, one of the things that I would love to see is if parents are empowered, or the earliest contacts of children are empowered to detect disabilities quite early so that they can seek early intervention. So we do training for teachers, we do training for parents and nannies, and just so that they are equipped, well equipped to detect disabilities early. The reason is that early intervention yields amazing results, and chances are that if a child gets access to early intervention, they would not need much support when they go to school. And we also last year launched our Read to Baby campaign, which is my favorite. So Read to Baby, what we are trying to tell parents is that the first 2 years of the child's life, you need to make sure that they don't get access to screen time, and rather introduce babies to books. And that has been something that has been running since last year. And we continue to do it this year. We give out free books. We go outside of Accra to a deprived community just to give free books. The idea is that by age 5, I'm hoping that every child would own 100 books.
Wow.
Yes.
100 books.
Yes.
That's an ambitious
yes.
target.
Yeah.
But I guess it's doable. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Finally, Albert, you are Edtech Support Associate at GSET. What does that role entail? How's your average day like?
Oh, okay. So thank you very much for having me. It's actually GSET.
GSET.
So GSET is Ghana Society for Education Technology.
Okay.
Yes, and at GSET, we see ourselves as a think tank for technology integration into education. We do a lot of teacher or educator capacity building, and we work around the clock with various partners just to make sure that technology is integrated effectively into education. So we have a society of educators of over 15,000 teachers who are part of our membership, that we have what we call teacher meetups and head camps.
Okay.
And we use these meetups to actually build capacity on how to use technology to actually enhance and transform education. My role at GSET is basically to support teachers to use technology, and hence the name Edtech Support Associate.
Wonderful, great guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's. I think we've laid the groundwork. We have some context to what you do and all of that. Prof, let me start off with you. What does inclusive education mean? I remember in my intro I read a few words. But what exactly does it mean?
Words did you I think it's just like the names are inclusive.
Yes.
So an approach to what we already know as in our educational system, where we are looking at content and delivery of the content in such a way that nobody is left out. So people from various backgrounds, people from various abilities and disabilities, socio-economic statuses varying as much as it is, they are all part of this learning process. And I'm saying it's an approach to the wider reform of our educational system. So that's what it means. Just making sure that nobody is left out. So making sure everybody, wherever you are, whoever you are, you have access to quality education, which is very important.
And how is it represented in our own local context?
I think over the years, I tried reading a certain document from UNICEF and Star Ghana. They came out with a report in 2015 where they were looking at it, kind of spells out how everybody should be targeted in making sure that everybody gets education. And it extends out of institutions to the community.
Mm-hmm.
So we are looking at having communities where people are supported, communities where people are nurtured to become very useful global citizens. So that's what inclusive education is in Ghana, in our
context
policy, yes. Mm-hmm. And then I think the 1992 Constitution also sees education not just as some kind of right or privilege, but it's actually a human right issue. So meaning that if it's a human rights issue, no human being should be denied education regardless of whatever or whoever you are. So our Constitution equally spells out the fact that everybody needs to have an education. I think our recruitment processes
Okay.
into these schools before, I don't know about now, but before, I have listened to a lot of elderly people talk about when they went to school and they came from various backgrounds, especially those who went to Achimota school. Because my uncle just spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, where he came from Kayoro in the Upper East region, and he joined people from Accra who were from privileged homes, and they were all in Achimota school. I think it was a way of making sure everybody had access to a certain type of education. So the way we picked people, students into our various schools was a way of ensuring inclusivity, I believe, so that you couldn't say you can't go to Achimota school because you were poor.
Yes.
So in that system, if that system is still working, then Ghana has it. We've been on track trying to get everybody involved in getting quality education. That is if it is still functional. I also think in various institutions, for instance, like I use University of Ghana, we have various platforms, provisions in the school where the school deliberately will select certain students from deprived communities to come to the University of Ghana. And I think even the bar for their entrance into the university is lowered because of where they are coming from. Because they've practiced this thing over the years. I remember our former Vice Chancellor, Professor Ernest Aite, at one of the graduation ceremonies, mentioned one overall best student who came from a village school with a very terrible aggregate, who ended up completing the University of Ghana, being the best student at the end of the day, meaning that if you give everybody the opportunity, people will perform. So there are deliberate attempts in various institutions like this to get such people, give them all the same level ground, and people will perform. And so in Ghana, like I'm giving all these examples to show that it's been going on trying to get everybody included in our institutions.
Yeah. See, Douglas, you are also quite big on inclusivity. So what are the challenges that educators face in making classrooms more inclusive so everybody sitting in there can also get that access to education, get the same knowledge and transform their lives?
All right, thank you. So if you look at our current education system, there has been a lot of changes here and there from government perspective, from NGOs and other individuals contributing to the change. However, the system as a whole will require a lot of work to be done in order to achieve inclusivity. Yeah. Now, when we go, typically, the challenges we face has to do with lack of infrastructure, right? We don't have the requisite infrastructure to promote inclusivity in our classrooms because I call them special kids, right? Or children with learning. I don't want to use the word disability.
Learning challenges.
Yes, I want to say challenges, right? Because if you go to a typical classroom where everybody is learning the same content, right? Irrespective of your learning preferences or how you learn, right? If you look at the back model that talks about visual learners, read and write, auditory, kinesthetic people, how do we even assess everybody? We assess you by your level of ability to memorize content and be able to reproduce it. But then we have other learners that are visual learners. How do we assess them? We have other learners that are more kinesthetic, who can demonstrate their learning through maybe a project, a physical project that you can see that, oh, I've read a document, but that's through my comprehension, this is what I can show for my learning. I'm not assessed on that. We are off box to
we don't have to write one
thing and all of that. So things. Then it becomes difficult to achieve inclusiveness, especially even in our test or assessment process, right? Now we go to places where there are large classrooms. Now, if you have large classrooms where students have different learning abilities, right, and you have a teacher taking care of all of these people with different learning styles, it then becomes also another challenges that we face in our education system because you cannot do differentiated learning, right? Because everybody can learn and succeed, but not at the same time and at the same pace. Therefore, if in the 21st century where we are talking about lifelong learning, self-paced learning, personalized learning, then there's the need for us to think about it. If we really want to promote inclusiveness, then this is another one of the biggest challenges that we are going to face. Now, apart from this infrastructure that we need and the bigger classroom challenge, I think that Edtech solutions are there to be able to bridge this gap, right? Edtech solutions can do this by also making sure that whether you are in a remote area where you don't even have access to internet, mobile devices can be loaded with offline content where the student can learn, right? Because of this modern technology and AI and all of that, it's also giving access to people irrespective of whether you have large classrooms, you can still have the opportunity to learn and absorb certain content to your needs based on your level and where you are and all of that. So EdTech is the solution, is the way to go because of the solutions that are coming up. One of the things that I would like to say is that I don't want to keep talking about the problems, but right, talk about more of the solutions, right? There's this software or this company that developed a software called Evidence B. With this Evidence B, it allows learners with AI powered, allows them to build or improve their numeracy skills. So you take a series of questions, and then based on that, it's reroute a curriculum bespoke to your needs.
Okay.
And then the learner is learn from that, and then assessment is done based on that, and then you progress. So these are some of the EdTech tools that are available that we can use from EdTech perspective to support inclusiveness in our education system.
Wonderful, great stuff. Gifty, let me come to you. You've been quiet. I see you've been writing a few things. Can you share some success stories, maybe in Ghana globally, of inclusive curricula that's been properly designed? Maybe you can tell us what factors would impact the design of inclusive curricula in Ghana.
So the West is always the best example. So countries like Finland, the UK, the US, they have really gone far in terms of inclusion or inclusive curriculum.
Okay.
Ghana, we have done well. There's still more to do. More schools are accepting children with disabilities. In the past, it was really difficult to get into schools if to get admission. One of the many other hats that I wear is that I'm a mother of a child with autism.
Okay.
Yes, and so I have been through the system trying to get get admission into schools. I remember I had gone to one and we were rejected. This is from 2014.
Okay.
And then the second school, I was
10 years ago.
Yes, 10 years ago. I remember I was shopping in Accra and I was called by the school to pick him up because they couldn't work with him. So I had to rush all the way, and go all the way to Adenta to pick him up from school because they said that they can't accept him. They can't accept him, and he was 4 or 5 then, but now many schools are accepting children with disabilities. So we work in schools, we provide speech therapy services in schools, and schools are willing to, schools are willing to work with children with disabilities. And for most part, it's expensive because you need to provide some supports for the child. The schools are not, able to, provide additional supports for that particular child. Although some schools will charge and get you that support that you need. Sorry about that. So I would say that yes, now many schools are accepting children with disabilities. And what factors? I think that policy, she talked about policy, the legal framework. We already have the Ghana Inclusive Education Policy. Then the Persons with Disability Act. They are all there, and it's just left with implementation. Yes, yes, implementation is always it's always the challenge. And so if we get the system implementing some of these policies, I think that every child would have access to quality, inclusive education. I think teacher training, if teachers are well trained to provide support for these children or these individuals, they would thrive. My brother here, yes, Douglas just spoke about designing the curriculum to suit every learner's learning life style, yes, learning style, yes. My son, for instance, is a visual learner. I always tell them, don't waste your time talking.
Okay.
Yes, just let someone else do it, and then he will pick it up. And they are always amazed that it ends up being, that yes, he's a strong visual learner. And so when you're giving the instructions to anything like that, he's lost and he's, so
He wants to see.
He wants to see.
exactly.
it.
So if teachers know some of these things, they would be able to support individuals with different abilities or different needs. So I'll give another example. If you were working with a child with autism who is also hyperlexic, that means that they decode words easily. Usually, children who are who are on the autism spectrum and are also hyperlexic, they learn how to read by themselves. So no one teaches them. Yes, so
I
they
see.
begin to they'll see TFM, they'll see
And
relevant.
they can quickly make the words out.
Exactly, and these are like 2-year-olds, and so if teachers don't recognize that this child could be on the spectrum, and for us, if a child is exhibiting excessive strength at a certain age, it could mean that the child could, have, autism. Not always the case. So if you're seeing a child exhibiting some of these strengths and you're not thinking that they have all these strengths, but they also have other challenges, which is sometimes communication, social interaction, and all that, you might miss out on supporting them. And yes, and they have this children, they have a lot of potential. But if the teachers miss out on supporting them, then and also recognizing their learning style.
Yeah.
Because if a child is hyperlexic, you want to present information in text because they are drawn to letters. Yes. And so if you are giving them other forms of it doesn't work for them.
You probably think
Yes,
that they are not
exactly.
doing well.
Yes,
But
and
that's-
continuous professional development. And she talked about research. There always new things are coming up. And so if teachers are well versed in some of these new trends, they are better. Sorry.
Sorry, you can have this. Listeners, you're still listening to the October session of Edtech Monday. We are talking curriculum design. Gypsy was making a point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And then, of course, in this part of the world, we talk about resources availability and funding. That is a huge part of inclusive designing an inclusive curriculum, because getting content into audio format, tactile formats, it's all costly.
Yes.
And so, I mean, institutions must be willing to, put some monies into it for it to succeed, so that every child can thrive, and actually every child can succeed. There are different, and also access to assistive technology, which he talked about. We've met students who are mobility impaired, and the only means, and then they are also communication impaired. The only means of communication is through their eye gaze. If you don't give that person an eye gaze technology to use to communicate, you might think that they have nothing to say. Actually, we piloted an app called the Relate app, Project Relate app. It's a free app, and we met a student from University of Ghana who said that she loved to write poetry, but because of she had a difficulty with writing, she stopped, writing poetry. But when we introduced her to that app, which uses AI to train, an individual's pattern of speech, and you don't necessarily have to have clear speech. Actually, it understands any form of speech, which we call the satric or the stammering type of speech.
Okay.
Or you can also call it in quotes unclear speech. And it has a transcription pattern that you can use. And she used it, and for the first time, she felt liberated that now she can go back to writing her poetry. We met a lawyer who said that she quit the court because judges couldn't understand her. And when we introduced her to the app, and she was like, you know what, this is like having a new toy, and she was going to consider going back to the court, So AT's assistive technology, yes, is definitely one, and then cultural attitudes. Sometimes schools want to include learners with disability or learners who learn differently, but the society, I've been to schools where the heads will tell us that we try to include these students that you're advocating for, but the parents, they begin to withdraw their awards because I don't know if they think that's infectious, you know, it's so
There's a
we
lot
need
of
to create exactly
re-socialization.
yes to do.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to. Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for that. Albert, let me bring you in. You've been doing a lot of the listening and nodding and agreeing. Let's talk about the Ghanaian school and how the Ghanaian school's curriculum can be credibly structured to include students of different abilities and backgrounds.
Okay, thank you very much. If you look at 2020's GEM report, Global Education Monitoring Report by UNESCO, you get to realize that we have, when it comes to inclusion, it's actually categorized into three. We have the physical, which will have to do with people who have, let's say, physical, in quotes, disabilities. We have the social inclusion, like Prof said, the society must first accept to include a person. Then we also have the academic inclusion. Now, it's evident that in Ghana, we are doing well with the physical inclusion and the social inclusion. We are at least doing well. But when it comes to the academic inclusion, that is where the challenge is. So to design a curriculum that will be very inclusive, we first need to actually engage stakeholders. So if we are talking about stakeholders, we are talking about teachers as the key implementers of the curriculum. And like Prof said earlier, the Ghanaian curriculum is already inclusive. We have the policies. The Ghanaian curriculum is a social constructivist curriculum that positions the teacher as a facilitator, looks at that sample question and answer and use it to finish up the work. Another child who already knows the thing can just move on and answer the question. So it's a question with, are we training our teachers well enough, or are we building capacity with our teachers well enough to be able to support inclusion, academic inclusion in the classroom?
See, wonderful. Great points there. So building teacher capacity is important. Prof, let me come back to you. You are the teacher here. So as educators, really, how can educators ensure that all will reflect all these diverse things we are talking about, background, ability, capacity, and all of that? How can educators ensure that curriculum content will cover all these grounds so everybody in the classroom is catered for?
I do agree with Juno.
Yeah,
Mr. Juno.
Yes.
Yes, that capacity is key. I think if educators themselves understand the whole essence of this inclusive education, the thing is whether people, as we are all talking about now, is there every educator out there who even knows about this concept of inclusive education? I think some of us in the educational system have just been practicing things without necessarily being conscious of the fact that what we are doing is to ensure inclusivity, right? So awareness and having that mindset that we are educators to everybody and not just a certain group of people, I think is key. And then say to that child who is not able to sit down for 30 minutes continuously, what do you do with that child? Do you just shout and say they are being stubborn? Or what do you do with that child who, whilst you are talking, they are busy writing and they are not even focusing? What do you do? So the ability to diagnose correctly and know what interventions to put in place will be key in your design, in when you are designing your curriculum. I think at the university level, it's easier because then you are dealing with at least people who are a bit more mature. So currently when COVID came, in most universities, at least I can speak for my university, the University of Ghana, the teaching styles and the mode of delivery of content has changed to the extent that if you are not the type who can sit down and listen to a lecture for 2 hours, these days we do recordings, we do self-paced kind of learning. If Gifty, I was a child and went to Gifty, she would have probably given me a diagnosis because I can't just think within the same space. People will be listening to music while they are. So let's, like I said, we record some of these things. Some people can just listen to the lecture. Some people can just watch videos. These days I use videos and stuff even in my lectures. So people will watch. You deal with all your sensories and then you have some.
That's great. Albert, we've said that's great. Albert, we've said a lot about the curriculum, building it and all of that. But how do we ensure that it's working? How do we ensure that we've built a curriculum that is inclusive, that encompasses all these things we are talking about? How do we measure the effectiveness of this inclusive curriculum we are talking about? After, let's say, we've built it and we've designed it, now how do we test its effectiveness?
Okay, so the end product of every curriculum. I think I didn't say this at the end product of every curriculum. I think I didn't say this at the beginning. I'm a licensed teacher.
I see.
So,
So now two teachers here.
yes, so I went in the classroom very well. Yeah, so the went in the classroom very well. Yeah, so the end product of every curriculum is the learning outcomes.
Okay.
Is a change in behavior.
Okay.
What should students be able to do after they go through a particular curriculum? So I think the issue of inclusion is that if we have 10 students, regardless of their level or their abilities, if they are all supposed to carry this bottle of water, they should all be able to carry it.
How to foster equality and diversity. My guests are still here. Albert Duno of the Ghana Society of Education Technology. Got it right. Ayoka is here.
Using teachers to these tools. But first, what I do to discriminate or not to discriminate about the learner and what is the learner generation characteristics. I'm a millennial. I'm teaching a Gen Z, or I'm teaching Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha, what are their characteristics? Now, screen time is higher for children like that. Now, Gen Zs have shorter attention span, right? They cannot concentrate on one thing. Because whilst they're on Facebook, they are watching video, they are testing somebody, they are doing it. So the same trait is being adopted by their children. And this child goes to a classroom where the teacher says sit down, and then the child will stand up. He says stop, then they start. Then the teacher says,
I totally agree with him. For the population that I work with, they mostly don't have access to the device itself before you can dwell on or kind of skills out to persons with disabilities whilst we're doing research. And we realized that for some of them, this is the first time that they are having access to a mobile phone. And so there's this tech shock, or that's how I term it, tech shock. Like they are holding a phone for the first time, so they are now trying to play around with it to figure it out. So I would say that I think we need to make sure that these marginalized groups have access to devices. And it's about time that we use anymore.
Okay.
Because someone's mobile phone also on their phone, they have apps. There are apps like Look to Speak, Your Eyes, Eye Gaze. These are free apps that people can use on their phones. But how can they get access to the phones? That is the challenge. And so I think government we all need to advocate for persons with disabilities, because if you are poor, you're already marginalized. Then you have a disability, you are double marginalization. Then maybe you are female, that is triple marginalized. So we need to look at all these factors and make sure that marginalized group, I don't know how we'll do it, whether there should be a way where they can access these devices and pay with it at a discount, or but once we recognize that now a mobile phone is someone's assistive technology, or assistive device.
It's no longer for
It's
the
not
calls and
exactly,
messages.
so we can even waive taxes on certain categories of phones, so that people can have access to it, especially persons with disabilities or the marginalized groups that we talk about. So that's it. And for a person with disability, that would be being literate in terms of digital 80s. How do they use it to empower themselves? There are lots of apps, but each time we've met the people that really need them, they don't even know about it. Yes, I remember when we were piloting another of the apps, Look to Speak. We met people, families that needed it, but they have never heard that it was.
That this whole idea of inclusive, teacher will walk into your house and pick a child and can go to school, because the teacher and your parents are all collaborating to make sure that you get an education. So I think we should go back to those same systems where the community will work with the educators and the government and all NGOs in the private sector. Everybody should do their part to make sure that we are producing human beings who are culturally sensitive. They are aware of what is happening in their societies, and they have what it takes to solve societal problems. So NGOs and private sector should make internship
management at the department. Okay, so 2 after. Okay, it's about 2 after 10. How? Let's get into the news.
In the news, one person was injured by